Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ben, and this is the LTD EC-201 flat top guitar. Let's go. Well, I'll be the first to admit that I don't really know a bunch about LTD guitars. I've had one of them in the past. I wasn't really a big fan of it, and I got rid of it shortly after that. But this thing popped up on my Sweetwater email, and I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. You know, a pretty bare bones Les Paul Jr. style guitar, but with the more modern features that you see on ESPs at a pretty reasonable price. Now, this guitar was $499, which puts it at pretty much the lowest end of the LTD line. So I was curious to see what made this guitar tick and why it would be the same price as some of their other models that seemingly have more features to them, like dual pickups, volume and tone knobs, switchers, things like that. So let's jump in and just see what makes this thing tick. Let's just start with the case. Now, there really isn't a case other than this cardboard box here. And you can see it's got some foam padding in it, and there's a little bit of cellophane and some rubber bands to keep things tight. Thankfully, they double boxed it so I didn't have a broken neck situation like I have in the past with other guitars. And that's pretty much all that's in the box. I was told there's supposed to be some tools in there, maybe a warranty card. I don't know if maybe it was removed during an inspection and never got put back in there or what. I'm not really too bothered by it, but if you bought one of these guitars and it came with that stuff, let me know because I'm curious. Now, the look is very much inspired by two things. One of them would be the Eclipse, which is obviously inspired by the Les Paul body style, and the second thing would be the Les Paul Jr., which is a single pickup flat slab body guitar based on the Les Paul. Now, this guitar is basically the Les Paul Jr. version of the ESP Eclipse, and as such we get the flat body, slight angle back with the neck, set neck by the way, single pickup. Now, where things differ a little bit, of course, is we've got the string through on the body, as you can see there. We've got a single control here that does coil splitting, and something I really like is the volute there on the neck. You see that? You can barely make it out. I think it's a nice touch. I don't know if it's for nostalgic reasons or if it's for the same age-old reason of if the neck falls, it's to add extra protection against snapped headstocks. I don't know. Otherwise, I really like the finish on this guitar. This is called the see-through black cherry, and I love that you can see the grain through it, front and back, as well as the sides, of course. The neck also. And the fretboard is what's called Brazilian cherry, or I believe it's Jodoba, and I don't have any other guitars that have this type of wood for the fretboard, so I'm really curious to see how that feels. And I do think that the Brazilian cherry fingerboard does look good on the see-through black cherry finish, but there's also an ebony finish available, and I don't think the fretboard works as well with that one, but it's still a pretty cool looking model. Now, when it comes to the body of this guitar, it's a solid piece of mahogany. It's a nice slab. From what I can tell, it's multiple pieces. It looks like maybe 3 or 4 different pieces. Of course, it's a set neck, much like you would see on a Les Paul Jr. or the ESP Eclipse line. It feels really good, feels nice and weighty in my hands. I love this sharp cutaway right here. I actually wish more guitars had pretty sharp angles like that. And that might be the first thing that drew my eye about this guitar, was knowing that it was sort of like a Les Paul Jr., but with the more modern sort of cuts that ESP is known for on their guitars. Other than that, there's not really any contouring on the body. I do think it might have been nice to have a little bit of a belly carve up here, or perhaps even a modern carve here on the upper end of the fretboard where the body meets the neck. You know, it's pretty simple though, and I'm looking forward to giving that a shot. Now, this guitar also has a 3-piece mahogany neck. It feels really good in my hands. I really love that they have the volute on there at the end of the neck. You see that right there. You don't see that on a lot of guitars these days, but I think it's a really nice touch. I don't know if they did it for nostalgic reasons or if it was for the age-old help strengthen the neck if you were to drop it, but I do think it's a really nice touch. Now, when it comes to the measurements of this neck, what we get here at the nut is a 1.69. Moving on to the 1st fret, we get a 0.84. And down here by the 12th fret, it grows just a little bit to 0.88. So overall, it's a pretty decently thin neck, somewhere bordering around like a medium slim taper, if that was a category. That's kind of what I would say. Now I do really like the cut of this neck. They call it a thin U, and you can see that's pretty much exactly what we're getting here. It's more or less flat for the majority of the backside of the neck, and then just slightly angles up for these soft corners, but it does kind of makes the neck feel a little bit beefier than what those measurements would entail. And I think that is just a matter of the fact that there's more wood around where your fingers curve, and it actually does feel really good. I'm excited to play it and see just how it compares to, say, like an actual slim taper Gibson neck or even a Fender neck or something like that. When it comes to the electronics on this guitar, well, it's a very simple story. What you're going to see here is one humbucking pickup, which is the ESP LH150B, and you get a volume knob that has a push-pull on it. So when I take the measurements of this pickup, I'm getting a 15.18 unsplit, and when I split it, I'm reading a 7.61. They don't beat around the bush with this guitar. It is basically for in-your-face tones, loud, gritty, and that's part of the charm of it, I think. One pickup, one volume, ceramic pickup of all things, right? When we pop open the back cavity, yep, it's about as simple as it looks. You get one push-pull pot there and then a wire going to the jack. And that is it. Now when it comes to the hardware on this guitar, well, most of it is blacked out, the exception being the pickup here with the chrome cover. Let's start here at the bottom. So we've got our oversized strap button, which you can see there matches the one up here at the top. And personally, I'm a big fan of that because I don't really like using strap locks. So if it's a nice oversized button that I feel offers some amount of comfort and protection with a regular strap, I'm all for that. Moving just over from there, we've got our black metal jack input, and I'm a big fan of that as well. They could have easily gone the cheaper route and put plastic there, but I think the metal is a good look, and it's good for a guitar like this, which seems to be made just for thrashing around with. Now moving up onto the body here, we've got our 6 ferrules, and obviously that's because we've got a string through design. I think that's a really sharp look. I wish a lot of guitars did that instead of putting a stop bar. Supposedly it adds sustain to the guitar. I don't know if there's any science proving that or disproving that, but I do think that it is certainly a possibility, and I do think it is a very good look on the guitar. Now moving up from there, we've got our Nashville style Tune-O-Matic bridge, which is made by ESP, and then of course we've got our body sunk bushings there to adjust the height on that. We've got our metal speed knob here to adjust our volume and our coil splitting, and then of course our chrome cover pickup like we've already talked about. Now when we get up here to the neck, we've got our what they call extra jumbo frets, and they do feel a little bit bigger than what I'm used to, which is the medium jumbo, but not by much for sure. Underneath the cover here, we've got our truss rod, which is sort of like the Epiphone style that receives the hex key. And lastly, we get to our tuning pegs there. And these are metal. I like the black keystone shape. They're not the best. They're a little janky feeling, as you can see here, and they are measuring in at about a 15:1 ratio, which is pretty decent. Now moving on to other materials on this guitar, well, there's really not too much. We've got our black plastic pickup ring here, which I'm a big fan of the pickup ring because it helps you set your angle on the pickup to match the strings, which is something that is kind of a problem on some of the SGs with the fat pickguard where the pickup lies flat to the angle of the strings. So this is an ideal situation here. And then when it comes to the triple ply black pickguard here, well, that's kind of a nice design too. I like that it follows the contours of the body as well. Now underneath this pickguard, in case you're wondering, well, it's not a pretty sight. We've got 14 screw holes, but for 8 screws. Yeah, I don't know where somebody messed up here at the factory or what, or if they fixed it when it came to America for inspection. Not really sure the story there, but I guess I'll just be leaving the pickguard on this guitar. And moving on to the neck here, we've got really nice black binding there. I know it's going to be a little bit harder to see, but that is a nice touch. Now these inlays, of course, are just pearloid. That's not mother of pearl. They wouldn't put that on a guitar at this price point, but they still look pretty good. Now on the side of the fretboard here, we've got our dot markers, and those pretty much go all the way up to the 21st fret. If I didn't mention it before, this guitar is a 22 fret model, of course. Of course, we've got the truss rod cover, which is just a single screw to hold that in, but it does the trick. And then we've got the nut here, which the only information I could get from LTD about it is that it was molded. So yeah, it's molded. And when it comes to the feel of this guitar, it obviously feels very similar to a Les Paul Jr. It's a very similar thickness there. The way it sits in your lap is very similar, and the way it feels when you're standing as well is pretty similar. Kind of the sharp angles digging into your ribs and that sort of general vibe. What I do think would have been nice is, since ESP and by extension LTD are sort of more modern riffs on classic designs, I think it would have been cool if they put a little bit of a contour here, a little belly cut or something like that. And I'm kind of wondering why they didn't do a more modern access where the neck reaches the body, just to differentiate it a little and kind of spit in the face of convention, like, oh yeah, well here's your classic design, but we're going to add these improvements to it. But that being said, it does feel pretty solid, and I'm eager to give it a try in a little bit here. Now the weight of this guitar comes in at about 7.29 pounds, which puts it roughly around 7 pounds, 5 ounces, just a little bit less than that. I do think it's going to sit well. I'll do the neck dive test, but I don't really expect much because the body is clearly the heavier part of this guitar. Next I'm going to do the sound test, and I really don't know what to expect because, as you can see, I've got one pickup that does coil splitting, and it's a volume, and that's it. There's no tone circuit. I don't really expect this thing to really have a ton of variation. I could be misspeaking right now, but we're going to find out in a second. Well, there you have it, guys. That is my review of the LTD EC-201 flat top. Now, it plays pretty great, I think. It sounds okay for having a single pickup with a ceramic magnet. The coil tapping feature is nice, but I do think if you had a better pickup in there, you would probably feel that a little bit more. You'd hear it a little bit different too. Something that maybe takes more advantage of splitting your coil as opposed to what's kind of already a harsh and very hot magnet to begin with. The feel of it's great. There's a couple manufacturing quirks that I'm not a big fan of, like having double holes drilled for the pick guard, which again, I would never notice if I didn't take it off, but just knowing it's there now, I'm like, yeah, that's something that should have never passed quality control. I'm not a fan of the fact that where the string through is, where they come up, they actually rest against the edge of the pneumatic bridge before they get into the saddle. And that's not really a desirable thing in terms of like tuning stability. Now, that being said, with what I'm doing, it stayed tuned just fine. Now, $500, would I recommend it? It's hard to say, you know, knowing what I know about it with like the double holes drilled there, the fact that the pickup is not really too versatile. It's hard to say. I'd be more curious to try the arch top EC model that has the 2 pickups and a little bit more tonal variation. It also has a stop bar, so you don't have the strings resting on the pneumatic bridge before getting into the saddles. So I don't know if I'd recommend it before playing the other one. All right, I don't know if that helps anybody at all, but that is my review. Thank you for watching. Next time.